Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Nerd to the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo. With me, as always, this epic quest of awesomeness is our resident anime goddess, the Cat. Cat, how are you doing?
I am doing okay. I'm really tired today for some reason, so, yeah. If I, doze off, don't mind me.
Well, considering it's just us two tonight, that's gonna be kind of awkward for you to do doze off, because I'll have to carry the whole show by myself. So, here's hoping you like the musical stylings of bluegrass. If that happens.
I believe in you. I believe you could carry the show on your own.
So we got a fun show for you guys this week. This week we're discussing weird endings, times where stories have kind of built up to an epic conclusion, and then the ending just kind of left us going, the fuck? So, but of course, there is procedure to follow, so we're going to begin, as always, with Ask a Geek, and let's just dig out some questions here. So this first question here, this one comes from Max, and it is to me, and he asks, what are my thoughts on the announced launch price of the Google Stadia, which, for those who don't know, the final launch price of the Stadia hardware has been announced, and it's $169. Now, I have made no secret of the fact that I dislike the Stadia, and I'm not going to go into that whole spiel about, why I think it's snake oil, but I just want you to consider this, okay? If the launch price of the hardware is $169, and then the subscription to the service is $10 a month just to be able to buy games, a one-year subscription, that's $120. Add those two figures together, you come to $289. Now, for $11 more, I can buy a Nintendo Switch, have the Play Anywhere ability that Stadia touts as its main selling point, and any games that I buy, because I buy physical where I'm able, I will actually own, and I won't lose them if the Nintendo eShop ever shuts down. So, again, just the one question that runs throughout this whole Stadia thread is just, what the hell is Google thinking? So, yeah, there's that question. And, let's see here. Ooh, here's a question that I think you'll like, Kat, and this one comes from Lewis. And his question is, what is a D&D module or setting that you wanted to play in but never got the chance to?
That I wanted to play in or plan?
To play in.
To play in. Well, gosh, oh man. So I'm still fairly new to getting back into D&D, so I don't know a whole lot about the modules per se. But Dragon Heist is one that I want to do because it's a heist. Basically, I want to do that one very much so. And High Rollers, one of the Critical Role shows that I watch, they did something called Rogue's Gambit, and I don't know if that's a module or not. I'm not super clear on that. But or Rogue's Gambit might have been their version of the heist. But the way that they played it was that everybody took a level in Rogue, and they basically played it like they were all agents of basically like MI5 agents. And I think something like that would be really fun. And I don't know if there's a particular module, but I do want to do an evil campaign. And I have a really awesome evil character that I've been saving for a Rise of Tiamat, if my group ever did a Rise of Tiamat or something. And a goblin campaign. I also want to do a goblin campaign real bad. Okay.
And he's got a secondary question here. I've been thinking about getting into Critical Role. Do you recommend I start from the beginning? Or is there a point later on that would be worth me jumping into and starting from there?
Oh man, that depends on which campaign you want to start in. If you want to start in the first campaign, you're okay to start a little bit later. A lot of people start after Orion Okaba leaves the show, so they start at the Briarwood arc, which is episode 20 something. I really like the early parts of campaign 1. There's a lot of really good stuff that goes on, and a lot of character, the NPCs and stuff that get introduced, I find really important. And I'm a completionist, so I started Critical Role when the new campaign 2, was just starting to come out. So I got lucky in that I could start that when it was still fairly new and there wasn't a lot of episodes out yet. Campaign 1, I went back and started from the beginning, and I watched / listened to all 115 episodes of that, and that took like a good solid 8 months to do. So if you are brand new to Critical Role, I highly recommend, if you aren't sure if you're going to like it and you maybe don't want to make a commitment to Campaign 1, definitely start with the first episode of Campaign 2. It is going to be really roleplay heavy versus very combat heavy, because it is like the first episode and they're all just getting to know all of these new characters. But the level of excitement in it is really like you get a good idea of who the people are. And then if you get through, because they're now on episode 69, so that's quite a lot of catching
nice
up to, right?
Well, hello there.
But if you could, there's literally no part of Campaign 2 that I would skip, just because it's not early into the campaign by any means, at all. But there's a lot of stuff that was hinted at early on or came up early on that became really important later. So we don't fully know in Campaign 2 what little things that happen at the beginning are going to become really huge down the line. So I wouldn't miss any of it.
Okay. And kind of a related question. This one comes from Elfminx39. That's just the name that shows up in the from space on the email.
Nice.
But they say, longtime listener, you said, Kat, on the show that you are a fan of One Piece and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, both of which are somewhat long in the tooth. Do you ever find it difficult to recommend a favorite anime or manga because of its length?
Oh, yeah. I love, say, One Piece, but even I can't keep up with it. I haven't even tried to keep up with it in a long time. The good news is that a lot of that stuff, My Hero is starting to get harder for people who are sort of newbies to anime in general. If you want to recommend them, hey, here's a series you can get into. Even My Hero is starting to get on the longer end. But thankfully, we live in an age where a lot of the super long series are not as popular. And I don't know if that's just been... I think it's been a kind of a gradual shift. I don't know if that's just we don't care about the long shows anymore, or if it's just not as profitable to do long shows. But it kind of seems like some of the more popular series either have shorter seasons or, brand new stuff is just coming out, not super long. So there's definitely plenty of good stuff out there that isn't tragically long, say, One Piece or JoJo. You don't have to watch 18 seasons to know what the hell's going on. And even, your One Piece, JoJo is a little bit different, but One Piece you could pick up probably at the start of any given arc and catch on pretty quickly, because it's not that plot heavy. But other series are a little more plot heavy and you need to know what's going on. So there's definitely plenty of shows out now that are just a season. Your Lie in April is a nicely contained story. Not one of the action shows by any means, but a nicely contained one-season story that does everything you need it to do without being too long. So there's good stuff out there that won't drive you bonkers.
Yeah, because just speaking as an outsider to the anime fandom, there's been many a time where you and I have actually had this conversation in the past, actually about One Piece and JoJo, where you said that they'd both be right up my alley and they'd be things I'd like to that I'd like to get into. But then I went and looked at how long they'd be running, how much material I had to cover, and I was like, no, I have a life that I have to live as well here. I can't bury myself in an even longer to read list than I already have.
Yeah, and for
he says he's reading a novel series that's at 27 books and counting.
Well, the thing is a lot of the longer shows like One Piece, if you're not already into it, you're never going to get into it. I think that's sort of the reality, because there's genuinely, there is no end in sight for some of these shows. They're just going to keep going on and on. Like Naruto proper has ended, but now there's Boruto, and if you're wanting to indulge in the entire franchise, there's no end in sight. Like, we don't know what's gonna happen. It's just gonna go on for fucking ever. So if you're not into it already, you're not probably gonna get into it in the future, and you're better off getting into something that's either a lot newer or a lot shorter. Get into My Hero or whatever else is really hot right now. Just
and then my favorite of the long runners is the joke that I have with a few friend of mine is that Detective Conan has been running since dinosaurs roamed the earth because of Jesus Christ.
Basically, the thing is that not as many people care about Detective Conan. It hasn't had as success as, you know, say like your Naruto and your One Piece. If it ran in Jump Comics and ran in like Shonen Jump here, it's infinitely more popular. So like your big name series, I don't remember what Detective Conan ran in actually, but I don't think it ran in Jump Comics here. But Detective Conan is way more popular in Asia than it is here, but also it had a lot of piracy issues here. So like it got, I don't want to say it got canceled, but I think it didn't get renewed, or some more of it didn't get picked up because of the heavy piracy issues.
Okay. And let's see here now. Is there another question for me in here? Just kind of even things up. Okay, here's one here, and this one comes from Terry. And he asks, if a game is multi-platform, how likely am I to buy the Switch version over other platforms? And this is actually a question I put to our listeners on our Facebook page as well, because I was interested in hearing what their response is. For me, that portability is just a huge draw. So if it's a case between getting, say, like the Switch version versus the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One version, usually I'll get the Switch version first. And part of a lot of the reason why the portability thing is such a big draw to me is my job. I work weekend nights. And the shift that I work is the slowest shift of the whole business. So there's really not a whole lot for me to do. So I'll go in, I'll do what work needs to be done, and then I pretty much have the whole rest of the night to kill. So I'll just, play around on my Switch. So like I said, that portability is a huge draw for me for the Switch. Now, there are some genres that I will not buy the Switch version for first, or will not buy at all. Primarily fighting games. The exception being Smash Brothers, of course. But like, Mortal Kombat 11 got a Switch port. I didn't buy it on the Switch. I bought it for the PC. Because the Switch version was locked at 30 frames per second. And fighting games is one of those genres where every extra frame counts. I also tend to not buy Soul-style games for the Switch. The exception being Salt and Sanctuary, which is a side-scrolling platformer version of Dark Souls, kind of a cross between Super Metroid and Dark Souls. It's a lot of fun, and I've had a lot of fun playing it on the Switch. And then I also kind of tend to avoid getting first-person shooters on the Switch as well. Again, just because I feel like those kind of games play better on my PC or on the PlayStation 4 versus the Switch. So those are really the only two genres that I will kind of shy away from getting the Switch version first, is shooters or fighters. But for most other genres, yeah, I'll be far more likely to buy the Switch version before any other version. Just because, again, like I said, that ability to just take it anywhere and just, keep myself from going mad of boredom at work when there's nothing to do. So, yeah, that's all the Ask a Geek questions that we have for this week. As always, you can send them to us through the email at drgonzo@nerdofthethird.power.com. Love getting your questions, love reading them on the air, so go ahead and get your questions in. So, on to the main discussion topic. So, unless you have been living under a rock for the last year, in which case, hi, welcome to the internet, learn to love cat videos. It probably hasn't escaped your notice that Game of Thrones had its final season this year. It has been building up to this epic conclusion. The last episode aired, and people felt a kind of way about it. Tweets were made, think pieces were written, and the internet kind of exploded for 3 days until we found something else to be kind of confused and outraged about. And the kind of controversy surrounding the ending to Game of Thrones and the discussion surrounding it kind of got us thinking, there have been a number of shows that have kind of built to these epic conclusions, and then the ending kind of left everybody kind of, at best scratching their heads and going, what the hell is going on? And at worst, thoroughly pissing off the fan base. So we thought we'd kind of take a look at this phenomenon and why it's so hard to kind of, tie everything up in a satisfying ending. Because it's not like it's impossible. I mean, shows like Breaking Bad have had, endings that have been met with great acclaim and much love. And then you have shows like, The Sopranos. Why did they cut to black in the middle of a Journey song? What the fuck happened? So we thought we'd take a look at some of these weird endings and what kind of why we think the showrunners went the way they did and what would have been a better, more satisfying ending. So, Kat, since you're actually the Game of Thrones fan of the cast, what was your take on how that show ended and how it handled its conclusion?
Oh god, it was not handled well. Bear in mind, I actually liked this season of Game of Thrones. There was a lot of good, but for most fans, that did not balance out all of the bad. And a lot of people, myself included, were somewhat dissatisfied, if not just gave up and being pissed off. There was so much to wrap up. And this was such a wide-spanning series. It had been going on for years and years or decades in the books, and there was so much. It's such a big world. And there's really big concepts going into it. There's a lot of destiny and bloodlines and really big stuff. And a lot of it got really skimmed over. The big battle between men and the White Walkers was one episode. It could have been an entire season, but it was one episode.
Well, because wasn't that something that they were building up since day one?
Yes, literally since the opening of the show, they've been building up to this final battle. And I'm not saying that it has to be the most important thing, but, it felt like it didn't carry a lot of weight. And that was a lot of what happened in the season, was there was a really high body count, but not for main characters. And a lot of people went out in a blaze of glory, but it just felt a little cheap almost. Like they were pushing so hard to get it all done in such a short amount of time. And obviously we're a bit forgiving because we know that there was 6 episodes. But on the other hand, when you find out that HBO offered them another season and the showrunners didn't take it, knowing that we could have actually stretched out in the appropriate amount of time kind of makes you even madder.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I saw a lot of people kind of upset about as far as this season, how Game of Thrones ended, was what they did with Daenerys' character. I know, yes. I'm not pronouncing that right. So what was the story there?
Okay, so Daenerys, there's been a lot of speculation, basically since season 1, about whether or not she was going to follow in her father's footsteps and go absolutely batshit insane. And a lot of people were very upset because she did go absolutely batshit insane and nuked a city when that wasn't the plan. And they had spent a little bit of time over the course of several seasons building up to the idea that she might go mad. And I have said since maybe season 5 or so that she was going to go crazy. I've been thinking it. I've been like, we're going to have Mad Queen Daenerys at some point.
You're calling your bookie in Vegas and setting up bets?
Yeah, and I have no problem with it. And a lot of fans don't have a problem with the fact that it happened. It was just the way that it was set up, the way that it was built. So Dany, has always been really, really okay with killing people as long as they're bad people. And then last season sort of pushed it to, she's killing people that aren't bad, it's just people who are in her way. And then this season was, she's just killing everyone because she's she's crazy. And there wasn't enough justification behind it. There was no real, it was really out of character for her. And I was really glad to see her just fucking nuking a city because it was at least different and exciting, but it felt out of character. Even though they had started to build up the idea that she was going to go mad. It just, again, it didn't have enough weight behind it. It just wasn't built up quite right. There wasn't enough time to build it up enough. And there was a lot of superficial shit that went into it that is also what pissed people off, because Dany finds out that her and Jon are related. So Jon Snow, the bastard, is actually the only other living Targaryen. And his claim to the Iron Throne is actually better than Daenerys's. So she kind of like flips her shit, because all of a sudden this guy that she's in love with is like freaking out because he just found out that they're related and now they should not be in a relationship together because ew. but also that he stands a better, and everybody likes him more, which was always going to be a risk for her. She wanted to just come in and claim the land with like no competition, no problems. Everybody should just love her because she's a Targaryen and she's like fundamentally a good person. And then she finds out that there's other people who are fundamentally good people, and the common folk actually like Jon. He's like a goddamn super idol to the north, and everybody loves him and would rather have him in a position of power than her, because everyone's fucking terrified of her. But there was, so the logic is there. There's logic behind everything that they did with this final season, but it was just so poorly executed. It needed more time. It's like these things are fine individually, but with throwing them all together in a very short amount of time without resolving a lot of things, like who is Azor Ahai? What does the Lord of Light want? Jon's a Targaryen? There's a lot of stuff that just never really got resolved. It was like it was just used until it became, too much to try and resolve, and then they just said, fuck it, we'll just brush it off. So a lot of people were really upset because this show had been such a slow burn. It was one of those shows that it took forever for anything to happen. Like, you had to deal with Ramsay for how many seasons and Joffrey for how many seasons, and then all of a sudden everything's super, super fast and just very poorly executed.
Okay, so if you were in the showrunner's position, what would you have done differently?
I would have taken the other season for sure. Now, granted, I feel bad for these showrunners because this has been their life for like the last 9 years. So they've spent like a decade working on one thing, and that must get really infuriating. And granted, you are never going to please everyone, but there was a lot that had been built up that should have been dealt with. And also because the people who are watching the show are also, a lot of them are the ones reading the books. And the book readers have much, much higher expectations than just the average show watch. Whole YouTube channels with hundreds of videos all dedicated to interpreting what's going on in the books. And there's so much lore and so much mythology built into the books that it's such a disservice to the show to deliberately exclude it all from the final season, when you have spent since basically season 2 building up the concepts like Azor Ahai and the Lord of Light, the Children of the Forest and the mythology of the White Walker. They introduced the concept that the White Walkers turn babies into other White Walkers, and that does not get resolved. Like, what the actual fuck? There's so much that just got dropped because it became inconvenient to concluding the story. And a lot of it was not that important by the end, but we as fans basically felt like we'd been duped into watching the show this long. And again, I'm saying all of this and I liked it. Imagine being one of the people who didn't like it. Oh my god. So I would have taken that last season, had a much longer battle. The Battle of Winterfell could have been quite a bit longer. There could have been more build-up for Daenerys going crazy. I would have, if I were the goddamn showrunners, tried to resolve some of the stuff with the Children of the Forest, and Jon's bloodline is actually quite relevant, and it's, a lot of the really cool things just became like temporary plot devices rather than like things that actually have value. And that's what was so disappointing. It's just the stuff that we most wanted out of the season just became convenient and not really actually important. And I definitely wouldn't have fucked up Jamie's entire character arc.
Okay. Me myself, I'm no stranger to bad endings, and one of the most heartbreaking ones to me was the ending to Battlestar Galactica, the 2005 series, which longtime listeners will know I was a huge fan of and I absolutely loved. And the thing that was so heartbreaking about that ending was that it went off the rails in literally the last 5 minutes. Everything up to that last 5 minutes was just gold. They'd had the final battle with they revealed who the final 5 Cylons were. There was the final last climactic battle between Cable and his faction of Cylons. They'd found Earth. The remaining humans and the Cylons had come to peace and were decided to coexist together or go their separate ways depending on whether or not you were a Centurion or not. And then it's revealed in the last, literally the last 5 minutes of the show that the Earth that they've landed on is a prehistoric Earth, and they're going to shoot all of their spaceships and advanced technology into the sun to live a caveman lifestyle with the what's the word I'm looking for? With the Neanderthal man. I'm sorry, what? You're basically going to you basically spent 5 whole seasons trying to save your civilization and find a new home for said civilization so that you can rebuild, and then literally in the last 10 minutes you're going to throw everything that makes that civilization what it is away and become cavemen. Like what the fuck? There's no part of this that makes sense. And I get what the showrunners were trying to do because they were trying to tie it into this cycle of, how history is a cycle and everything that has happened before will happen again, yada, yada, yada. But it was just such a clumsy ass way to do it. Because essentially what you've told us is now all of these people who have been on the run, trying to save themselves from literal genocide, are now going to basically die to disease and predators of the wildlife of this new planet that they've landed on. And it just made absolutely no fucking sense for anybody to go along with this. And I imagine there must have been some kind of literally just everyone's just cool. It's like, okay, yeah, we're just gonna throw our spaceships into the sun and all of our advanced technology and hope that enough of us know how to farm. And it just made absolutely no fucking sense because it didn't fit at all with the established tone and lore of the series. And I realized that, so some people say, well, they had to make up their ending because the original Battlestar Galactica didn't get an ending. I was like, okay, yeah, I get that, but they could have done a hell of a lot better than this. So it was just really piss poor writing all around. Now, what I think if I could have had them do something better, what I would have had them do is one of the running threads throughout the series was how the Cylons were growing more and more similar to humans, and because one of the chief antagonists are actually these Cylon models who are pretty much indistinguishable from human beings. They have flesh, muscles, organs, all good stuff, and they can. One of the plot threads, they've actually figured out also how to reproduce. And so you have this thread of these two basically species merging together into one. And when they actually found the original Earth, because the Earth that they wind up on at the end of the series is, not the Earth they were originally searching for. It's complicated. It makes sense of context. But the first Earth that they found was this bombed out hellscape. And it's revealed that the inhabitants of that Earth were, in fact, Cylons who had become human and built their own Cylon Centurions, had the Cylon Rebellion, and got wiped out. So if it had been me in the showrunner's position, I would have had the second Earth also be populated by human-like Cylons who'd gotten their shit together and coexisted with the machine Cylons, and it's like, oh, hey, look, these are, long-lost brothers from the 12 colonies. Let's welcome them in and integrate them in with us. And it would fit in with this whole arc this whole theme that they were setting up throughout the whole series of how the humans and Cylons really aren't that different and they can coexist together in harmony. And they just threw all that shit out the window in literally the last 10 minutes. And I just remember watching the last minutes of the show just with my jaw on the floor, just like, what the fuck? I honestly thought that, like, I'd fallen asleep at some point and had started watching enough and had woken up in the middle of another show. That's how jarring that shift was. So, yeah. So do you think... So I guess one of the questions I want to ask is, do you think maybe that that some of these things are cases of the writers kind of setting themselves up for failure, where they build up these big, huge, arcs that they just make bigger and bigger and bigger until the point where it just collapses under its own weight and there's no possible way that they can resolve things satisfactorily?
Well, it might be some of that, and it might be like, oh, this was the intent from the beginning, but they're trying to be so cerebral about it. They're trying to make a point, and in making that point, they're actually sacrificing logic. You know, like they're trying to make an artistic statement, but rather than do that, they're just like being confusing.
So it's like they're trying to make an artistic statement, but one that doesn't fit in with the established, I guess, boundaries of the show.
Yeah, I mean, like there's always like, there's a plot twist for shock value rather than for like quality.
Yeah. I can definitely see that. Another one that caused a real stir on the internet when it happened was, of course, the infamous Mass Effect 3 ending controversy, where, you know, of course, the Mass Effect trilogy had built itself up as this kind of sci-fi space opera war story against the Reapers coming in to wipe everybody out. And then literally in like the last half hour, this series that had prided itself on being, you know, about, you know, hard, consistent internal science and, you know, your decisions having consequences, and, you know, the developer stating that, you know, the ending isn't going to be determined by just a press of a button. And then in the last half hour, it goes all Arthur C. Clarke, and you're introduced to this funky ass magical star child who basically says, yeah, you just press one of these buttons and choose what ending you want. And it has absolutely no consistency with the rest of the lore or the plot. And basically just goes, look, it basically comes out to the point where the developer's saying, look, we don't know how to end this. Just pick something. And it got to the point where they actually had to release, and this is the only time I've ever seen this happen, a free piece of DLC to actually rewrite the ending of the game, which I've never seen done before or since. And I just remember watching this whole drama unfold, and I'm just like, man, this is just a mess all the way through. And I later learned that there was actually some other stuff going on behind the scenes that might have contributed to this, because the chief writer for the first two games, a guy named Drew Karpyshyn, had actually he'd either, I don't know if he quit or got fired, but he for some reason he parted ways with BioWare and the Mass Effect series after the second game. And he had actually been setting up, you know, stuff throughout the first two games to kind of lead up into the ending of the third, and then those plot lines were all dropped when the third game was released. So that's another thing I think can kind of contribute to, you know, an ending going all weird, is if suddenly the chief writers and showrunners, you know, are suddenly changed out mid-run. But yeah, that whole Mass Effect thing was a mess all the way through. What about you, Kat? Any other endings that had you kind of scratching your head or going, what the fuck is going on here?
Well, I'm an anime fan, so obviously almost everything I watch. Now, you and I have been friends for a long time, so I'm wondering if I've ever brought up the concept of a Gainax ending around you.
Of a Gainax ending?
Yeah, so Gainax is a studio.
Yeah, that much I remember. I don't think you've ever. I mean, I'm being someone who trolls TV tropes. I've run across the concept, but no, you and I have never discussed it. But for our listeners who are not familiar with the concept, what is a Gainax ending? Okay,
so a Gainax ending, and you can find this on, because I was looking at it earlier today. And I don't know that we talk about it as much, because Gainax doesn't really have. It's not as common now to have this happen, maybe. I mean, it probably is, but I don't think the younger generations use this term the same way we did. But a Gainax ending, it got famous by the studio Gainax, who in the late 90s, early 2000s, maybe even up to the mid 2000s, they were releasing a bunch of anime series that didn't have good endings. They didn't know what they were doing. They had run out of money. Something had happened, and so they had to rush the ending to the point where the ending makes no sense at all whatsoever. So the best obvious example, like the key introducer of the Gainax ending, is Neon Genesis Evangelion. That fucking ending doesn't make any sense, and it's not necessarily because they were trying something artistic. It's because they ran out of money and couldn't finish what they had started with how they wanted it to end. So they had to end it real quick. So it got real fucking weird. But even a simpler show that is less cerebral than that is Karekano. And that's just a nice slice of life, high school romance show. And something had happened, and they ended up having to end it before they intended. So they cut it off right as they were introducing a new character. They ended it right as they were about to start a new arc. And so it ends so abruptly and so weird. And so Gainax got this reputation for fucking up every ending of everything that they release. So we see this a lot with anime series. You can say Full Metal Alchemist, the original Full Metal Alchemist, not Brotherhood, suffers from a Gainax ending because the manga or the anime caught up with where the manga was. And the showrunners didn't know how to end it, so they just said, "Fuck it, we have to make something up to conclude it." And then it gets really, really weird because they don't know necessarily what they should be doing. So it just gets really goddamn weird. And this happens a lot, or at least it used to. And that's why they have to fucking re-release shit. And they made Brotherhood and other shows like this where they've just started remaking it because the endings made no sense and didn't really sit well with audiences. And they know they can do so much better. And so that's just a shit ton of anime. If you've ever watched more than 5 series, you know what I'm talking about. The Gainax endings are literally, Gainax pioneered the terrible endings.
So I want to loop back to a couple series that you mentioned, the first of which being Full Metal Alchemist. So I just want to ask for clarity. What do you consider to be the end point of the anime? Are you talking about the ending of the anime itself, or are you counting Conqueror of Shambhala as the ending? I'm counting Shambhala in there because it was released as part of the same strain. Okay, because I would actually argue that for Full Metal Alchemist that was a case of they should have quit while they were ahead. Because, and again, this is just my opinion. If you cut off Conqueror of Shambhala and disregard it, the anime I feel has a pretty satisfactory ending. I mean, if not the happiest one, but it's one that is at least internally consistent. And then you add Conqueror of Shambhala, and it's oh well, we've just gone completely snooker loopy.
Yeah. Conqueror of Shambhala really fucks up Full Metal Alchemist. But even if you just look at the series itself, if you were to compare it to the manga or to Brotherhood, it gets way off the tracks. They fuck up the homunculi. Somewhere in the creation of the first Full Metal Alchemist series, they decided that Envy was Ed and Al's brother. What? There was just a lot of shit in there that really went off the rails, and I enjoyed it mostly.
Yeah, and then the other one you mentioned, Evangelion. Now again, having never seen Evangelion itself, but I seem to recall that being kind of the anime version of Mass Effect 3, where did they have to actually put out a whole movie to rewrite that ending?
Yeah, well, one of the things is that anime movies tend to have a much higher budget than, say, a regular TV show, so they look a lot better. So I think that might have been part of why they did a movie, was to get the actual quality of animation that they wanted. But yeah, they put out a movie or several. And
End of Eva, wasn't it?
Yeah, they did End of Evangelion, and then they did the... I don't know if you want to call them movies or OVAs, but the newer Evangelion stuff, the 1.0, 2.0, the newer things, if you watch Evangelion, you know what I'm talking about. But they basically FMA Brotherhooded it and re-released Evangelion as like maybe movie length episodes every couple of years in order to get the quality of animation that they wanted, but also to include more characters. And it's basically the original storyteller telling it the way he wanted to tell it from the beginning, but they just didn't have the money or the technology when they first released the original series. Okay. So there's shit like that at least with the anime, but it could also extend to like TV shows where they just run out of money and shit gets weird.
See, for example, the ending of Star Trek Enterprise.
Oh my god. You want to talk about an American show that went the goddamn rails? Dollhouse. Joss Whedon's Dollhouse. I love Dollhouse. The last 2 episodes? Holy shit, what the fuck?
So, okay, so I didn't see Dollhouse, so for those of us who aren't familiar with it, what happened there?
Okay, so Dollhouse is more or less, at its simplest, the story of a group of people that basically take human beings, real-life human beings, and essentially deprogram them and reprogram them as whatever a willing person wants. So that's why they're called dolls, because they're real-life humans that have had all of their personality temporarily stripped away and then replaced with whatever is most convenient at the time. And so, a lot of it's like kinky shit and whatever is needed for a certain scenario. And a lot of the times it's just like fucking weird kinky shit. But anyway, the story sort of escalates further and further to, it gets a little more, 80s post-apocalyptic shit, dystopian futures where people are dolls and they don't even know that they're do you know that you're a replicant kind of thing. And that gets more and more weirder and weirder and weirder. And then the last 2 episodes are basically this like post-apocalyptic end of the world, like set a few years later, and the world has just fucking ended. Like this war broke out, everything's awful. A lot of the dolls have regained like their normal humanity, their normal consciousnesses, but the world is basically a shell, and people are fighting to survive, and it's a goddamn nightmare scenario, and it's the story of the main character trying to reconnect her body and her mind, basically, and it's so fucking weird. And it's like, what? Wait, what? And it's like they basically nuke the planet by the end of it. And you're like, holy shit. And I am 100% convinced that this is the same universe that Firefly is set in. And you cannot convince me otherwise that this is the before. Yeah, I think this is like the world where humanity left behind because shit was too fucked up on Earth, and then that turned into the Firefly universe. But it just got so goddamn weird in the last 2 episodes. And what made it worse was that the way that the DVD and Blu-ray release was packaged, that they had to put, in order for consistency's sake or something, when they released the last 2 episodes like on the wrong order. So,
oh man,
it's really fucked up. So there's like an episode of this, like I think they actually tacked it on after season 1. One of these episodes, but not both of these episodes, and you're like, what are you doing? Jesus.
All right. So excuse me. All right, so again, the question becomes: if you were the showrunner, what would you have done differently? Aside from not take it to Fox, because that's apparently a mistake that Whedon keeps on making.
I know it really is. He's got to not do that. Gosh, I don't even know, because the level of escalation that happened starting in the second season, like
second seizure,
the second seizure. definitely going
Because
to
what
go
you
right back to Evangelion.
because from what you're telling me about the show, that sounds like what happened. It's just the show had a seizure.
God, yes, it really did. Like the escalation was irreversible. Like the way, it got into, it started off as this is really weird, but okay. It went to like government conspiracies and then nuke the planet. Like that's the escalation process. It got real weird. And I don't know if I would have escalated it quite the same way. I think the Dollhouse had, like, I liked it at political intrigue, but like the world being at stake was where it lost me in terms of all of the shit that happened. That's where it lost me in believability, Like, that shouldn't be. You should have lost me at they can program human beings, but I liked the show, so I'm willing to buy it. But once they get into we have to nuke the planet, that's where I'm...
And that's where you're clocking out, huh?
Unless it is directly a prequel for Firefly, then in which I'm okay with it.
Okay. All right. Well, we're kind of running down on the end of our clock. So those are some of the weird ass endings that we were kind of scratching our heads at. What's a show for you or a story for you that had went off the rails in the last act? So go ahead and sign off in the comments or in the email. We'd love to hear from you guys about this. So yeah, that's all the time we have for Nerd to the Third Power this week. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will see you back here in 2 weeks for our discussion of Stranger Things, not just season 3, but the show in general. And wow, there's going to be a lot to unpack. So thank you as always for tuning in. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm the Cat.
We'll see you in 2 weeks. Taka, play us out.